While I, like most others, buy Nintendo consoles for their big name franchises, your Marios, Zeldas, Smash Bros, etc., I also always love it when Nintendo has a fun little experiment to put out. So when Nintendo unveiled Nintendo World Championships NES Edition in May, my interest was piqued. Even more so as it immediately reminded me of one of my favourite hidden gems of the Wii U, NES Remix. Taking its name from the classic tournaments Nintendo held to seek out and crown the world's most skilled gamers, Nintendo World Championships NES Edition essentially compiles a collection of roughly 150 bite-sized speedrunning challenges from various NES games that you can tackle solo or while competing against others. It's a great premise, and the kind of experience only Nintendo, with its storied history, could produce. Now, having finished every challenge and dabbled in every mode, I can say that Nintendo World Championships is a fun game that mostly delivers on the promise of its concept, but it's also light on content and lacking some crucial features you'd expect to find in a game all about speedrunning, which prevents Nintendo World Championships from being the true slam dunk it should have been. The first thing you'll do upon booting up Nintendo World Championships is create a profile to tell others a little bit about yourself, and it's here that you'll first get a hint of that magical Nintendo charm. First you choose a slogan for your profile, some of which are goofy little jokes, while others can inform players where your history with Nintendo began, which for me was the Game Boy Advance and GameCube. You then pick a sprite from one of the 13 games showcased in Nintendo World Championships NES Edition to serve as your profile picture. And finally, you select your favourite NES game from a list of every official NES game ever published. And while there are scores of excellent choices, for me, that game has to be my beloved Mega Man 2. From here, you're dropped into the main menu to explore Nintendo World Championships modes at your leisure. The meat of Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is its speedrun mode. This mode presents you with 156 bite-sized challenges drawn from various segments of 13 NES games. Mario 1, 2, 3 and the Lost Levels, Zelda 1 and 2, Metroid, Donkey Kong, Kid Icarus, Excite Bike, Ice Climber, Balloon Fight and Kirby's Adventure. This is an eclectic selection of games, and they're all no doubt important games in Nintendo's history. With that said, the quality of these games is wildly inconsistent. While a game like Mario 3 is an all-time classic that remains endlessly playable today, there are some real stinkers in the group. Ice Climber in particular is a terrible game. I have no idea how anybody could derive fun from Ice Climber. It is one of the clunkiest games I've ever had the misfortune of playing. Ice Climber is ostensibly a platformer, but it's also a game where jumping feels bad due to the stiff controls, so getting through these challenges was like pulling teeth. Not because they're particularly hard, but because Ice Climber's moment-to-moment gameplay is a miserable slog. There are also some stranger missions from Nintendo World Championships lineup of games. Namely, how do you not include Punch-Out in this game? Punch-Out would be a perfect fit for this kind of challenge-based game. You could easily imagine Nintendo making challenges like avoiding a flurry of punches, or beating specific boxers. I think Punch-Out would be a far more natural fit for this game than something like Excite Bike, a game whose challenges feel extremely repetitive due to the limited nature of that game. Thankfully, the good does outweigh the bad, and of the 13 games featured here, most range from decent to great. The challenges you're presented with in Nintendo World Championships start out very simple, but become more complex and challenging as you progress. When you begin, you're given tasks like getting the first mushroom, or collecting all the coins on screen in Super Mario Bros., grabbing the Morph Ball in Metroid, and inhaling an enemy in Kirby's Adventure. But after that, you start getting some more involved challenges, like beating the Aquamentus boss fight in Zelda, collecting the harping Kid Icarus, or getting all the optional items in a level of Donkey Kong. Then finally you ramp up to the meatiest challenges, like completing Super Mario Bros. As quickly as possible while using warp pipes, finishing a full dungeon in Zelda 2, and surviving the escape sequence in Metroid. Nintendo World Championships challenges are sorted by game and then ordered by difficulty, with each of the challenges having a rating from 1 to 5 stars besides its name to indicate how challenging it is. As you complete these challenges, you'll earn coins that can be used to unlock further challenges and buy more profile pictures. If you're unfamiliar with one of the games in the lineup, and therefore are unsure of how to complete some of its challenges, you can watch a demo playthrough to see how they're done, and when you get to the final challenge for a game, its Legendary Challenge, you'll be able to view a Classified Information tab that will give you a rundown of the challenge and tips on how to achieve the best possible time in it. When you complete a challenge, your performance is graded based on how quickly you finished it. Though Nintendo World Championships is quite generous with its grading, you'll likely effortlessly get an A on most of the challenges. In fact, there were probably fewer than 10 challenges where I didn't get an A rank on my first attempt, even in games like Balloon Fight and Ice Climber that I'd barely touched before now. Getting an S rank is where the real challenge kicks in, and S ranking some of the 4 and 5 star challenges is extremely tricky, requiring pixel perfect precision, as even the most minuscule misstep on the way to your objective will result in a lower grading. As soon as I started playing speedrun mode, I noticed a bafflingly absent feature. There are no online leaderboards in Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. This is a catastrophic miss for a game about speedrunning. One of the main appeals of score-based games is comparing your scores against friends and other players online. With leaderboards missing, you're only competing against yourself, and while there is some fun to be had in trying to best your own scores for a few hours, the lack of leaderboards dramatically hurts the replayability of Nintendo World Championships. Once you've had your fill of speedrun mode, you can hop online and try out the World Champions and Survival modes. In World Champions mode, each week you'll be given a selection of 5 challenges pulled from the 156 speedrunning challenges to put up your best possible times in, and at the end of the week, you'll see your ranking both worldwide and in regards to players born the same year as you, which is an interesting little touch. While in survival mode, you'll take on 3 consecutive challenges, competing against the ghosts of 7 other players. After each challenge, the number of players is halved, as the lowest scorers are booted out, going from 8 players to 4 to finally just 2 players in the final challenge. There are 2 of these survival mode challenges to play through each week, 1 Silver Division challenge and 1 Gold Division challenge, with the challenges selected for the Gold Division being significantly more difficult. On paper, this is a good idea for a mode. The problem is the execution of survival mode's presentation. In survival mode, you see all 8 players' screens simultaneously, and by default, you're playing the game on a tiny square that only takes up a fraction of the screen. This is far from ideal when playing on a big TV, but when playing your Switch in handheld mode, survival mode becomes borderline unplayable. There is an option to increase the size of your screen in settings, but you're still only playing off of half of the screen while trying not to be distracted by the 7 other screens moving in your peripheral vision. This entire mode just doesn't feel thought out for the platform this game is on. I know there are plenty of players who primarily play their Switch docked, but I almost exclusively use my Switch as a handheld, so I was immediately struck by how poorly thought out the layout for survival mode is. The final mode found in Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is Party Mode. Here, you and your friends play through a series of these challenges, and after each round, players get awarded points based on their performance, with the player who has the highest cumulative score at the end of all the challenges being crowned the winner. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition can make for a good party game, especially when playing with just one other person. But party mode has the exact same problem as survival mode, in that the more players you throw into the mix, the more the screen becomes an incomprehensible mess. Nintendo's consoles have long lacked an achievement system, something I've always been a little saddened by as a massive trophy whore. But sometimes Nintendo's developers address this lacking feature through in-game achievement systems, and Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is one such game that does this. Nintendo World Championships has 182 unlockable badges that you're rewarded with for completing various tasks, ranging from getting A ranks in challenges to winning a Gold Division survival bracket. While I'd still prefer Nintendo to have some sort of achievement system, as I love the metagame of trophies and achievements, and having them as a way to look back upon many years of your gaming history, this is at least a nice consolation, and getting these badges does still scratch some of that collecting itch that trophies would usually satisfy. These in-game badges are reminiscent of the badges that come with the awesome Collector's Edition of Nintendo World Championships NES Edition. And as a side note, shout out to that Collector's Edition. It's one of the nicest special editions Nintendo has put out during the Switch generation, and I was pleasantly surprised by how reasonably priced it was. Even as someone who doesn't usually go for Collector's Editions anymore, this was one that I couldn't resist picking up. While Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is a fun package, it's very light on content. I'd seen and done everything the game had to offer in 6 or 7 hours, so Nintendo World Championships longevity will depend entirely on how much you crave chasing better times. And don't get me wrong, there is an addictiveness to trying to shave those precious milliseconds off your times. However, the lack of leaderboards caused me to lose interest faster than I would otherwise. If I had that tangible example of my skill in the games improving as I inched my way up a global leaderboard, I'd feel more compelled to keep coming back. But as it stands, I've put about a dozen hours into Nintendo World Championships, and I feel like I've had my fill, and I'm ready to move on to the next game. Nintendo World Championships NES Edition is a good first attempt at this concept, and I think there is major potential for this to become a series. You could easily imagine this game leading to a Nintendo World Championships SNES Edition, which I would love to see, especially as it could be an opportunity to correct the shortcomings of the NES Edition. While Nintendo World Championships NES Edition will undoubtedly be a great nostalgia trip for Nintendo fans, and there's a great game at the core of it, it also suffers from a lack of content and egregious missing features. I mean, how do you make a game about speedrunning, then fail to include leaderboards? Because of this, while I had fun here, and do see myself jumping back into Nintendo World Championships from time to time to try and improve on my times and chip away at S-ranking all the challenges, it's also a game that I could only wholeheartedly recommend to hardcore Nintendo nerds. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. You can find countless other videos on my channel, including my recent review of Senua's Saga Hellblade 2, and be sure to stay tuned for my upcoming reviews of Cat Quest 3, Black Myth Wukong, and Astrobot.